On today's episode of Let's Talk F1, we discuss Romain Grosjean being disqualified from the 2018 Monza Grand Prix. Has Sebastian Vettel thrown the title away already? We look forward to some more rumours and gossip in the F1 2019 silly season. The F2 report is back with the Monza Grand Prix report. All this and more, next. Welcome back to Let's Talk F1, everybody. It's been a week and a little bit, we will say. It's been a week and 2 days since the last episode. This episode should have come out on Tuesday. Tuesday was a busy day. So what we've ended up with is a Thursday episode, which means it won't be too long until the next episode. But in this time since the last episode, we've had the Monza Grand Prix. And after the race, the big news broke that Romain Grosjean, in one of his best performances of the season, was disqualified from the race. And that's where we're going to start today's episode of Let's Talk F1. So, let's give you the rundown then. Romain Grosjean, best of the rest, best of the midfield in qualifying, managed to get a fantastic P6 for Haas with Daniel Ricciardo starting all the way at the back of the grid. It was then a question whether Grosjean could stay in 6th throughout the race, whether he could stay there and pick up those vital points for Haas. Not only did he do that, but Carlos Sainz, who started behind him, ended up the race all the way down in P9. But, even though Haas had gained a tremendous amount of points due to that 6th place from Grosjean, 8 in total, which meant they had a total of 6 more than Renault, Haas was able to jump Renault into 4th into the Constructors' Championship, which is amazing for Haas considering they're only in their 3rd ever year of Formula 1. They're currently locked in this, I don't want to call it a titanic battle, but an extremely close battle between themselves and Renault for 4th in the Constructors. Now, Force India were in that fight as well, so were McLaren. McLaren have slowed down a lot with development of this year's car, and they've dropped completely away from this fight now. Force India went through the name change and complete team change, meaning they are now all the way down in 8th in the Constructors, and they won't be anywhere near this fight, I don't think, come the end of the season, unless they can get a really fantastic fluke result somewhere. So really, realistically, it's just Haas and Renault. They're the only two fighting for this 4th in the Constructors. So, what happens next? Well, at the end of the race, Renault file an official complaint about Romain Grosjean's car, in specific, the flaw of his car. Now, I am not an expert in Formula 1, let's say, bodywork regulations, minor bodywork regulations. Someone that is and does a fantastic job of explaining why Grosjean was disqualified is Chainbear F1. His video I will link down in the description below. But to give you just a brief overview, Haas were running a brand new flaw on this car at this weekend, and they had been warned going into the weekend that they were up for scrutiny from other teams if other teams decided to do so. Practically saying to the Haas team, this flaw doesn't really look legal. We're not going to look into it, but if other teams complain, then we will. That's pretty much what the FIA told them. And Renault, at the end of the race, after losing out major points in that Constructors' title, said, you know what, we are going to file a complaint. Screw you, Haas, screw you, Grosjean. You're losing some points today. The FIA investigated, and yes, the flaw was illegal, and Grosjean and the Haas team, unfortunately, were disqualified from the Monza Grand Prix. It's now question marks whether for next time out Singapore Grand Prix they're going to have a new flaw, as in just make minor alterations to the one they got now, or if they're going to use the old flaw again. We're not 100% sure about this. But I'm sure you want to know my opinions on this, especially considering I have a slight bias towards Grosjean. I would say he's my favourite of all the drivers on the grid. Probably, I am aware of his flaws for sure, and I'm not a die-hard Grosjean fan. It was more back in the day I was a die-hard Lotus fan, and Grosjean's the last real element of that team on the grid. I know Raikkonen was there as well, but Grosjean, he was there longer, and so I had a bit more allegiance to him. So he would be my favourite driver on the grid. But I always like to mention that, just so if there's Any new guys here? Welcome, of course, welcome. But I just want to throw that out there so there's no hidden figures or anything like that. If you catch my vibe there, But Grosjean, for him, I am gutted. That would have been 8 major points for him in the standings. And since we've come back for this summer break, I feel Grosjean's been better than Magnussen. He has outraced him twice and outqualified him twice, but it's only been 2 races, so you can't really read too much into it. But this was another strong race from Grosjean. He scored points 5 times in the last 6 races, which he should be doing in that Haas car. I'll put my hand up to that. He definitely should be. But he's been, in the last few races, doing a better job than Kevin Magnussen. Form is definitely on Grosjean's side at this stage of the season. But with a big result like this, a 6th place, for a team like Haas, this will now be a big, big setback for them, considering this championship. It really will. This really, once again, throws completely wide open the championship, which, hey, that's fantastic. We all want to see it go down to the wire. But it does seem a bit dodgy that Renault waited to the end of the race, waited to see if Haas would beat them, to then lodge a complaint. It just, for me, seems a little bit petty from Renault, but at the end of the day, Haas did have an illegal flaw, so that should not be ignored. I think for me, the frustration comes from the fact everyone waited till after the race, and that, for me, should not be allowed. I think that is a major, major, major flaw in the regulations, that this car was able to race illegally, and at the end of the race say, actually, no, we shouldn't have actually let you in here. Sorry, we're taking away your points. That is ridiculous. It's very unlikely Haas would have been able to make any changes to the floor, but it was always a possibility. If they were told, when they were using the floor on those Friday practices, if they were told, you can't use this floor, they could have made changes or at least tried. And for me, that's a real failure from the FIA to spot that, and I really hope for any team on the grid this doesn't happen again. Haas are only 10 points behind Renault, but that big gap they had made had put them in 4th. So, I don't know. It just seems like Renault being a bit of a pain in the ass, I think. I mean, it's really hard to say because they were in the wrong, Haas, and we've all got to put our hands up to that, but it's just annoying that the system allows a car to race illegally and at the end of the race say, no, that didn't count. And I just wanted, at the start of this Let's Talk F1 video, just to get my opinions across to you guys, because I haven't had a chance to comment on it yet. I haven't done my review of the Monza Grand Prix. Probably a little bit late to that, but I will put one out just so you guys know what I'm thinking. Probably today or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow will be the plan because there's no race this weekend. But yeah, I just wanted to get my opinions across to you guys because I know a few of you know that I am a little bit of a fan of Romain Grosjean. But with that story done then, I think we're going to move on to the main, I would say, bulk of the video. The biggest story we're covering today, and that is Sebastian Vettel. Now, I don't want to have to do this, but straight away I'm going to have to throw out there that I am not a Sebastian Vettel hater. But we do have to seriously ask the question, has Sebastian Vettel thrown away the F1 2018 World Championship? Now, this is already a topic this year That could very easily have been debated. 4 times this year, Sebastian Vettel has made unnecessary contact, which has made him lose an incredible amount of points. And this weekend, at the Italian Grand Prix, in front of the Tifosi, in front of the adoring Ferrari fans, Sebastian Vettel made contact with Lewis Hamilton on the opening lap, causing him to be at the back of the grid at the end of lap 1, do a 2-stop strategy, and just about finish 4th on the road on a day in a car where he could have easily got a first place and take the lead of the F1 2018 World Championship. Things didn't quite pan out, as I mentioned, like he would have planned. Probably Ferrari's plan was, yes, from the line, hopefully get Sebastian into the lead in front of Raikkonen, then Raikkonen hold up Hamilton if possible, or Raikkonen stay in front of lap 1, and then during the pit stops, put Sebastian into the lead, Raikkonen second, a 10-point advantage for Vettel over Hamilton in the championship. Now, that's not what happened. At the end of turn 4, Sebastian Vettel, on the inside, defends from Lewis Hamilton, are going around the outside of the chicane. Hamilton leaves plenty of room, more than a car's width. Vettel oversteers a little bit, slides into the side of Lewis Hamilton. Contact is made. Vettel spins round. He's at the back of the grid. Hamilton's on his way, chasing down Raikkonen. Now, Vettel had a great race after that, slicing his way through the pack. It would have been a 5th place, but complications ahead with Bottas and Verstappen, with Verstappen's penalty meant Sebastian finished in P4. The contact, I think, 100% Vettel's fault, but at the same time, 100% a racing incident. No penalty should be given. So I think the stewards got that call 100% right. And I'll just mention now, the stewards, apart from, let's say, the Romain Grosjean disqualification, not, well, waiting for after the race. Apart from that, they had a fantastic weekend. Probably the best and most consistent weekend they've had all season long. So I just wanted to say that because I was really impressed with the stewards this weekend. But this story of Vettel making silly little mistakes when wheel-to-wheel racing has plagued his championship all year. And I think now the gap between Hamilton and Vettel is 30 points. So even next time out in Singapore, if Hamilton DNFs on the opening lap and Vettel wins, Hamilton will still be in the lead of the championship. And you know what? I've done a few little calculations, let's say, and this championship should look a lot different. So I'm going to go through with you now what I'm going to call how Sebastian Vettel is currently throwing away this World Championship. So throw your minds back to the opening 2 rounds of the season. Vettel wins both of them. This Ferrari car means business. Vettel looks like he's on form. Ferrari look like they can beat anyone. We then show up to China, where the race is a little bit more chaotic, and at the time we have the craziest race of the season, the best race of the season so far, where Red Bull make a perfect strategy call. Vettel was leading until he was beat by Bottas through the pit stops. Then, with Red Bull's fantastic strategy call, Vettel loses out on more places, eventually making contact with Max Verstappen. Now, this is the first incident I'm going to highlight. I will admit, before anyone gets angry, that was not Vettel's fault. No way was this Sebastian Vettel's fault whatsoever. Max Verstappen dive bombs him, destroys any chances of practically a podium, more likely to be a 4th place Sebastian would have got. Ended up finishing in 8th place. Now that was 10 points lost from that one little incident from Vettel. Now, the benefit of hindsight here is fantastic, and Vettel probably just should have let him go. There was no way he was going to be able to hold Verstappen behind with those fresh tyres in a quick Red Bull car on that day. And Vettel probably should have just let him go. That could have been his intentions, but Max did do a bit of a crazy dive bomb. But with hindsight, Vettel probably should have let him go. We will include that in our numbers of points lost at the end, but even without that, the amount of points lost is staggering. We then move on to our next case study, Azerbaijan. This one was Sebastian's fault. behind the safety car, end of the race. It's a sprint race between the top 4 guys, Hamilton, Raikkonen, Vettel and Bottas. Bottas leads from Vettel. Safety car in. Bottas leads, heading towards the first corner. Vettel then dive bombs Bottas, out of nowhere really, locks up, gets it all wrong, nearly into the wall, ruins his tyres, then is passed by Raikkonen, passed by Hamilton. Bottas DNFs, but at the same time, Sergio Perez is able to pass Sebastian Vettel because of Vettel's lockup, because he ruined the tyres, and it was a 4th place for Vettel. And on that occasion, that could have been a win if he'd have just, I don't know, just hung back a little bit. Just took his time, assessed the situation a little bit more. He could have had the win on that day. And I am going to say, that is 13 points lost. Could have finished first, ended 4th. The next incident took place at the Circuit Paul Ricard, Le Castellet in France. The first time we've gone back to France since 2007. And on the opening lap, Sebastian Vettel completely destroys his front wing. You can see it on screen right now. Dives right at the inside of Valtteri Bottas. Destroys Valtteri Bottas' race more than his own. But Vettel, again, on a day where he could have won very easily, ends up at the back of the grid at the end of lap 1. A safety car did help him in that occasion, catch up a little bit. He ended that race in 4th place. I'm not going to say outright he could have won this one, but what I will say is 2nd place on this day was definitely on the cards. And so we're going to say that's 6 points lost, but in a championship this close, 6 points can be pretty mega. The next case study is the biggest yet, and this picture says it all. We all remember this one this season. If you're a casual fan, all I will say is the biggest bottle we have seen all season is right here on screen right now. Sebastian Vettel, the German Grand Prix, pole position in front of his home crowd, leading the race from lap 1, no issues whatsoever. And then the rain came down. Not a lot of rain, as you can see on screen. Sebastian, a slight mistake, slides his car into the wall, leading by a country mile, now has no points. And to add insult to injury, Lewis Hamilton, whose car broke down in qualifying, started all the way back in P14, wins the race. Somehow, out of the blue, Hamilton had an absolute blinder in that race, came from P14, carved his way through the field and won the race. A little bit to do with team orders. We'll throw that out there. Bottas had a really good chance of winning that one. But Mercedes said, Valtteri, mate, you got to calm down and let Lewis win this one. And on a day Sebastian could have really made another 10 points gain on Hamilton in the championship, ended losing out 25 points. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this little story, last weekend, last time out, Monza, it's just painful. It really is painful. Again, has a real chance of winning. Throws it away on lap 1. A very similar kind of incident to the French Grand Prix, where it's almost as if he's desperate to not lose positions on the opening lap. He just wants to stay in front of those Mercedes and bottles it. And I don't really want to say bottles it because I don't want to say it's a commonly used phrase, but it's the correct phrase I think I should be using for this. It's so out of the blue for a 4 times world champion to be struggling on the first lap. And unfortunately, Sebastian has done it. And on a day where he could have won, he ended up 4th. And that's 13 points lost. And quickly going back through my calculations, we're being very scientific and mathematical today, everybody. In China, a loss of 10 points. In Azerbaijan, a loss of 13 points. In France, a loss of 6 points. In Germany, a loss of 25 points. And in Italy, a loss of 13 points. That comes to a total of 64 points. And even then, because I know some of you will say this in the comments, that I can't really count the Chinese Grand Prix, because that's fair enough. That's 54 points. 54 bloody points. That would put him 20 points ahead, 24 points ahead of Hamilton in the championship. And it wouldn't even do that. It would put him further ahead because Hamilton would have lost points. Which, that is crazy. And at this level of Formula 1, you can't be throwing away points like that. And he's done it time and time again this year. And yes, I will say, you can have a couple of these in a year. You can have one or two. And if you're fighting for a world championship, one is probably the maximum. Vettel's done it on arguably 5 times this year. We'll say 4 because China wasn't his fault. But even 4 times. And this isn't including any strategy calls that have gone wrong for Ferrari. This is just purely Sebastian's driving. And let's be honest, it is a shame. It is a shame because Mercedes have dominated for so long and Ferrari have the best car this year. There's still enough races in this season. I believe 7. 8? 7? 7. I think 7 now. Yeah, 7 left. But he's got to have no mistakes. And Lewis, he's got to have to start having more. I'm trying to think of any major mistakes on opening laps Lewis has had, and the only major one wasn't his fault, and that was Silverstone, where Raikkonen took him out on the opening lap. Hamilton, I'm not a Hamilton fanboy, so I'm not here to say Hamilton is better than Vettel because Hamilton doesn't make any mistakes, because he does make mistakes. But it's just been, and my opinion, that at the moment, Vettel is throwing away this championship because of these mistakes. And I think, if I'm being totally honest, it's because part of me really wants him to give Hamilton a real run for his money this year. That's why I'm being critical right now. Because when you're fighting for world championships, there's no room for error. And Sebastian has made, in my opinion, too many errors this year. And I think the damage, if I'm being 100% honest, has already been done. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was on stream on the F1 word, I know I love to bring it up, but I was asked by Sean and John T, who do I think is going to win the World Championship at the halfway stage? And I said, honestly, it's going to be Lewis. And the reason I said that was mainly because of these mistakes Sebastian has made. And Lewis, yes, has made mistakes this year. He has not been an angel for sure, but has been the better of the two in terms of making less mistakes on track and less clumsy errors. But, big but right here, I want to know what you guys have to say on this story, because this is a huge, huge story in the world of Formula 1. And it's a big statement to come out and say, I think he's already lost the World Championship. The damage he's done already, I think is going to be too much. And that 30-point gap, Hamilton has a really nice leeway now, where for the rest of the season, he can just get second places. Second place, second place, second place, and be right in the mix. The Ferrari has the best car for the rest of the year, and that is Sebastian Vettel's big bonus he has. But we also know that within one weekend, that can turn around in Formula 1. And with a track that Mercedes most likely won't suit next time out, and Red Bull will be a big threat, Ferrari have to be on the money and fighting for a win where Mercedes are unlikely to even be on the podium. But again, show up Singapore, Mercedes could be right there. So, like I mentioned, I want to know what you think. I'm going to do a poll in the top right-hand corner on the iCard. Do you think Sebastian Vettel has thrown away the championship already? Yes or no? You just have to vote yes or no. But also, I want to know in the description what you have got to say on this, because it's the big talking point, and I'd love to know your opinions. So before we move on to the F2 report, I wanted to quickly go over F1 silly season, and I love this picture on screen, but unfortunately this man, Esteban Ocon, he's the one on the left, if you didn't know. He currently is at Force India, but it looks like Lance Stroll is coming into Force India and Sergio Perez will be the one staying at that team. Now, yesterday on the F1 Words live stream, we did discuss silly season, so I don't want to regurgitate too much because the majority of that stream was talking about all the different options all these teams have. So that link will be in the description if you want to check that out after this video. But I just wanted to say, Esteban Ocon, although it looks like he's not going to get a seat at Force India, I would be very, very surprised if he wasn't in F1 next year, and I'd be very surprised if he wasn't at Williams. That is my prediction for Esteban Ocon. I think he will happily go to Williams over any other seat available to him. I will throw that out there, because that's the issue. There's not many seats left now, and Sauber still have 2 seats to confirm, Toro Rosso have 2 seats to confirm, Williams have 2 seats to confirm, Ferrari have 1 seat, Haas has 2 seats. Now, Haas would be a great place for Ocon to go, but if I was going to put money on it, I think Haas are going to keep the same lineup. I think Force India, like I say, they have 2 seats, but that will be Perez and Stroll. Ferrari, I think, will be Leclerc and Vettel. I think Raikkonen will move out, which leads me to say we have 2 seats at Toro Rosso, 2 seats at Sauber, and 2 seats at Williams. Van Dorn is on the market. Ocon is on the market. They're the 2 big players, and it's going to be whether they can somehow, with their experience, find a place in the remaining teams. Now, Ocon, I think, is the more likely out of the 2 to get a seat, because he's got those links to a Mercedes, and out of the 2, he's been the better driver. 2 years experience now in Formula 1 and has proved to be a very promising driver. Up against Sergio Perez this year, he's done the better job. So, for me, if he isn't in F1 next year, that is a huge crime. But I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, because I really think he will be at Williams next year alongside Sergei Sorokin. That would be my Williams lineup. I think that would be a solid lineup for Williams, unless the team decided to go Ocon and George Russell. George Russell is currently the F2 Championship leader. Lando Norris was confirmed at McLaren just this week. That was the big news there, so they're all sorted. And I think Russell deserves a chance. If Norris is going to get a chance, why not give it to Russell? Arguably, the more polished of the 2 is George Russell. And it would be great to see him in Formula 1 as early as next year. But then the question mark comes in, what's the rush? Why should we hurry to get these guys in F1 when they have chance to mature and learn in the lower categories? And yes, Charles Leclerc's come in and done fantastic things straight away, whereas Stoffel Van Dorn, who had an extra year to mature and learn, he struggled having that gap in between. So it's a real fine margin, and I think depends on the driver, depends on whether they should be thrown in straight away or given time to mature, and it's a really hard one to call. So we'll just have to wait and see what Mercedes and Williams decide there, but it would be great to see Ocon and Russell in that Williams car next year, but I really think it'll be Ocon and Sergei Sorokin there. With Sauber, they'll keep Ericsson. I'm pretty confident of that. And as I said, I think because Leclerc will go to Ferrari, I then think Antonio Giovinazzi will then get that call up to Sauber, and I don't think there will be anything crazy going on with that team for next year. The biggest question mark left, apart from Esteban Ocon, is Toro Rosso. Now, you'd think with Toro Rosso that they would go for young drivers in their young driver academy, like McLaren have done with Lando Norris, like Mercedes most likely will do with George Russell, and like Ferrari have done with Charles Leclerc. The only difference is the Red Bull Young Driver Programme currently has been bled dry. Pierre Gasly, you can see on screen, is moving to Red Bull next year. And their next, I don't want to say rising star, but their next young driver in the highest category is Narai Fukuzumi. Now, he is in Formula 2, but is very, very, very unlikely to have enough super license points, which is how young drivers get into Formula 1. They have to collect enough super license points to then be able to race in Formula 1. And that's the big issue. Fukuzumi, he's a Honda young driver and a Red Bull young driver. He will not be most likely getting anywhere near enough points this year to get into Formula 1. As well as Dan Ticktum, he's done very well in lower categories, but due to an altercation off track, wasn't allowed to gain any super license points this season, and so he won't be able to move up to Formula 1. And their other drivers have been, well, so sparsely spread across the world of motorsport. Brendan Hartley, who they currently have in the car, was a world endurance world champion and Le Mans winner before he came to Formula One. He was in the Young Driver programme back in 2010 and has only just now got his big chance in Formula One. And it's unlikely that they will retain his services next year due to his lacklustre performances, which, to be fair, I would like to say it's a shame, but it's been really nice to see them give him a full year in F1 because he seems such a nice guy and he's such a humble guy and just happy to be there, which is really nice to see in Formula 1 because sometimes, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to have to, the likes of Lance Stroll don't appreciate the opportunity, but Hartley has been around the world, he's been there, done that with most categories, and the fact that he's getting a chance in F1 is lovely to see. But, nevertheless, we've still got 2 seats to fill, which is always fun to speculate and question who is going to be in that Toro Rosso next year. Big rumours, big rumours are linked with this. We had Norris. Was Norris going to go there? We now have the likes of Van Dorn being linked with the seat. Helmut Marko's come out and said that's not really going to happen. Ocon, again, the team have said no, that's not really going to happen. Yesterday, Helmut Marko came out. He's the man who runs the Red Bull Young Driver programme and Red Bull Racing and Toro Rosso as a whole. He came out and said there were 10 names on the list to race for Toro Rosso next year, which is a big, long list. But I think there's only a few that are really in contention. So, first of all, Brendan Hartley. I think he has a chance to stay next year for sure. But I don't think it'll be him. We also have Sebastian Buemi. He, this weekend, did a car fitting, doesn't currently have a seat in Formula E next year. So that for sure is an option for Toro Rosso. Daniel Kvyat. He's been heavily rumoured to return at Toro Rosso. Now, this one for me would be the nicest option for Red Bull and for Toro Rosso because he's the quickest driver and most experienced driver they can have. This man beat Daniel Ricciardo over a full season when they were in Red Bull together. There's no joking, this guy has got talent. The issue is, the way Red Bull treated Kvyat, the way they kicked him out of the sport, pushed him down, said, look mate, you got to move out the way, Verstappen's coming through, pushed him down to Toro Rosso, ruined his confidence, and ultimately didn't even let him stay for a full season, was despicable. And for Daniel Kvyat, if he came back into that environment, that would be a really questionable move from his part. But then there's the other side of the coin. Because at the end of the day, a Formula 1 seat is a Formula 1 seat. There's 20 spaces in the world, in the entire world. And to take up one of those spaces, not only have you got to be a special driver, you've got to be extremely lucky in the right place at the right time. And Kvyat at the moment is a reserve driver for Ferrari, which is a great position to be in considering the spread that Ferrari has and the capability in multiple different categories of motorsport that they're involved in. Kvyat, you never know, could be driving for Ferrari at Le Mans next year in the World Endurance Championship. He could be part of the Ferrari Formula E team that they're currently working on. There's so many options. Whereas if he gets his chance in Formula 1 again, how are Red Bull going to treat him? Arguably, they could take him back with open arms, and if Gasly doesn't perform, Kvyat, you've got a space in Red Bull again. And also looking into the future, with Verstappen, let's say likely to move on to Ferrari or Mercedes come 2021, who are Red Bull going to put in that car with Gasly? A lot of question marks, and if they put in, let's say, Buemi and Hartley in that seat, well, Buemi and Hartley aren't going to have a go in a Red Bull car, that's for sure. So, a lot of question marks for Red Bull, and it's a real difficult time to pick a driver. And I think the most sensible option for the team would, well, like what they do with Max Verstappen, go into the lower categories, look at drivers with enough super license points, Alexander Albon, Artem Markelov, for example, and say, look, it might be better off picking up some of these guys that are big talents in the lower categories and giving them a go. And I think that's what they should do. I think the lineup for Toro Rosso next year should be Artem Markelov and Alexander Albon. I really think if Toro Rosso are going to continue being this team that blood in fresh meat into Formula One, if you know what I'm saying there, Albon and Markelov would be a fantastic pairing, and I think would do wonders for that team. I really do. But at the same time, do they want someone like Hartley to try and help develop this engine? It's a really interesting seat to look at. And I don't want to go over it loads because we're about to go on to the F2 report, but it's a real interesting silly season we're having in Formula 1 this year. And if you don't know what silly season is, basically it's just the big transfers. That's what we call it. We call it silly season because it's silly, and it's been great this year so far. We've still got lots of announcements to go, but the biggest ones for me will be Toro Rosso and Williams. They're the biggest ones I think everyone should keep their eye on because I think there's going to be a lot of surprises. But if I was going to put my money on anyone at this point, Williams, I'm saying Ocon and Sorokin, and Toro Rosso, I'm going to say Alexander Albon and Artem Markelov. I'm going to say it. A little bit left of field, but that's what we're going to go with as we now move on to the F2 report. Welcome back, everyone, to the Formula 2 report, your weekly dose of Formula 2 action. Now, Formula 2 on this channel isn't a major thing, and I think Formula 2 is definitely underappreciated within the Formula 1 community. So within Let's Talk F1, we have this little 10-minute section just going over all the up-and-coming drivers in Formula 2 and a little roundup of what went on over the weekend. If you're unaware of what goes on in Formula 2, we have a qualifying session and two separate races. Race 1 is the feature race worth more points, and race 2 is a sprint race, a shorter race where qualifying is decided in a reversed grid order with the top 8. But what we just do in this little section is just go through the best performers of the weekend, who did well in qualifying, and an overall sort of look on the championship. Qualifying then, let's start with that, and it was George Russell once again, the Brit who is arguably destroying the championship in terms of wins and pole positions, continued his dominance on that stage with another pole position at Monza. It was Sergio Sette Camara who got P2. He is teammate of Lando Norris. Alexander Albon, the one who I think should go to Toro Rosso next year, he was third. Artem Markelov, the other one who I think should go to Toro Rosso next year, was fourth. Nicholas Latifi, the Canadian, was fifth. And Lando Norris was sixth for Carlin. The race was pretty carnage, as it always is in Formula 2. Markelov, straight away in those early stages of the race, took the lead over George Russell. He dropped down at the start, went to around third place, and for the majority of the race, it was a Markelov lead, Albon second, and Russell third. But late on into the race, an inspired decision by Takasuki Makino to come in for some fresh tyres ended up destroying the field late on, chopping and changing through absolutely everyone, including his teammate Artem Markelov, and starting in P14, ended the race in first. His first win in Formula 2, and you know what? He's not scored many points apart from that win. He's only scored points on 6 different occasions before then. His best finish was a 7th place in Austria. A complete fluke result in Formula 2, but a fantastic race for Takasuke Makino. His teammate Artem Markelov came home in second place and also had the fastest lap, so he had 20 points. So a fantastic haul of points for Russian time. They're a long way out of contention for the Constructors' Championship because of the awful season Makino has had up to this point. However, a fantastic race from Takasuke Makino, and he will have to be driver of the weekend for that performance. An absolutely stunning result for Russian time. Alexander Albon qualified third, finished third, however, running in second for the majority of the race, will probably be disappointed with that. George Russell started on pole, as I mentioned, he finished fourth. He will be disappointed for that. for sure. Nicholas Latifi finished 5th, and Lando Norris started 6th and finished 6th, but did have some fantastic battles with George Russell on both race 1 and race 2. Race 2 then, George Russell was able to take the sprint race win, finish off what he started in that qualifying. Arsene Markelov, another strong result, 2 second places of the weekend, proving why he should have a chance in Formula 1 next year. Sergio Sette Camara, he ended up getting 3rd after qualifying 2nd initially, but fell down the order in race 1. Nicholas Latifi got 4th for Dams in the second race. 5th was Lando Norris, and 6th, Luca Giotto. A solid race from George Russell in that sprint race. Really helped him gain a considerable amount of points over Lando Norris in the championship. The gap now is 19 points. A long way off what it had been the previous time out. Last time out, it was just 7, and in one weekend of Formula 2, anything can change. Behind those two, Alexander Albon is 20 points behind Lando Norris, so Albon is definitely still in contention for the championship, a 39-point gap to George Russell. A lot of things are going to have to go wrong with Russell, considering the form he's in. It's going to be very unlikely indeed, but the consistency of Norris, who's only missed out on points twice this year, could help him with these 4 races to go. But he's going to have to improve on qualifying and in that feature race if he wants to get the title. Markelov is in 5th in the championship. He is out of the running of the championship, in my opinion. 59 points off is quite a big gap. And Nick De Vries, former McLaren young driver, really struggling, getting 8th in the feature race and not scoring any points in the sprint race. And he'll be, well, let's be honest, very disappointed with that, considering he is 64 points. 64 points off George Russell, championship leader. And going into the season, Nick De Vries looked like he could fight for that championship, but unfortunately, it hasn't quite panned out as he would expected. 6th in the championship is Sergio Sette Camara. Like I mentioned earlier, he's teammate of Lando Norris and missed out the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. However, he is still 56 points behind Lando Norris, which is quite a big margin. Again, that whole weekend is a lot of points missed. He could have picked up 40 points, potentially. Unlikely, but he could have. But it's not been the best season from Camara, I will just point that out. But again, it's not been awful. He's another driver that maybe could sneak a drive in Formula 1 at some point in the future. 7th is our young Ferrari driver, Antonio Fuoco. He's really struggled this year. Some races and some weekends, he's managed to pick up podiums here and there, and it's generally been the rule, if he doesn't get in the points, he then gets on the podium. So it's a bit strange. So he's either on the podium or no points at all. Then comes Luca Giotto. He's had a bit of a poor year, to be perfectly honest with you. He's 8th in the championship. 9th is Nicholas Latifi. And 10th, just sneaking into 10th this weekend, was Jack Aitken. He's another rookie, another British rookie that, coming into the year, I thought he would do really well. He's teammate to George Russell, but he is 157 points behind. That is a huge gap, and we don't really know why. Aitken has definitely performed well, even in the sprint race this time out. Did very well in the sprint race, and probably was the driver of the day in the sprint race this weekend. But he just hasn't been able to have that formal year, and at the beginning of the year when I predicted who'd be in F1 next year, I thought Aitken could have a run at that Renault seat. I thought he'd have a really good year in Formula 2. But that being said, hasn't really panned out like that whatsoever. But with 4 rounds to go in Formula 2, the championship is still anyone's game. Russell, Norris, Albon, and even Markelov has an outside chance of winning this championship. It's all going to come down to the wire in Formula 2 once again. I've said it all year. I think Norris would get the win. However, I'm now starting to think it could be Russell. It's so hard to predict. If I was going to put my money on anyone, at this stage, it's probably going to have to be Russell. But I'm going to go with Norris. I think Norris has been so consistent this year. I think he might just edge Russell, but if Russell can pull off some incredible qualifying performances like he has done in feature races, especially recently, I'm sorry, Norris, you have lost this. George Russell has destroyed every single race since Monaco. Monaco, he got no points at all. Really difficult weekend. But every feature race since then, he's been on the podium, except in Hungary, where he DNF'd. He has been insane in this second half of the season. And I think it probably will continue. But maybe, just maybe, that form has got to end at some point. And Norris, with this incredible consistency he's had of scoring points, I think he might just be able to nab it. I think he might, but he's got to be able to pick up a race win. He's only had one feature race win this year, and that was the first round of the season where he looked so good. Maybe this news of going to McLaren is going to, hype him up a bit more. Give him that little bit more adrenaline, that little bit more energy to push him over the line to get that McLaren drive. But that is the end of the F2 report. Let's finish off. Let's talk F1. So that's it then for another episode of Let's Talk F1. It's been a controversial one, arguably the most controversial one we've ever done. And because of that, I want to know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. We've discussed the Grosjean disqualification. I'd love to know what you think about that. Were Renault a bit cheeky, or is it fair play? I'm more leaning on the side of it is fair play, but they were a little bit cheeky in the way they dealt with it. The big one, has Sebastian Vettel thrown away the title? That is a big one, and like I mentioned, I'd love to know your thoughts about that. And if you haven't voted on that iCard, do it now. Click I in the top right-hand corner of the screen. A quick poll will pop down. You don't have to sign up to anything. You just click, even if you're not signed in, and see what other people think. I think that'll be a really interesting debate to look at. I'd love to know your thoughts as well. If you want to put any comments, I will talk to all of you about that, because that is a lot of fun to discuss. We also discussed a little bit of silly season, and I'd love to know if you've got any outsider thoughts who will be in Formula 1 next year. MotoGP world champion, multiple world champion, Marc Marquez. It looks like he might be in for a chance at that Toro Rosso seat. A lot of question marks around Toro Rosso. Just before I go as well, I want to mention in the description, I will have links to my, appearance, let's say, on the stream yesterday with Sean and Jonty over on the F1 Word. Officially now, I am the Wednesday regular, so on Wednesday at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, usually 7 o'clock I think it is now, I'll be over there streaming with those guys, talking about F1, talking about all that goodness. So that is a lot of fun, and if you fancy checking that out, please come over. I will tweet out about that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm over there as well. Career Mode, that next episode will be coming out on Saturday, and I think I'm going to do one every Saturday, one every Wednesday. That'll be the plan going forward. In the description as well, I'll have the link to Chamber's description on why Grosjean was disqualified, all the nitty-gritty stuff, which he does a fantastic job of explaining. But I think that's it. That's everything talked about. We've spoken about F1. We've talked about F1. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.